COP27, the annual UN climate meet with 190 nations, is currently underway in Egypt. And there's mounting pressure on all developed and developing countries to cut down carbon emissions, which are contributing to global warming. Now, today on the Property Show, we focus on India's real estate sector and ask again, is it doing enough to cut down harmful emissions? If you look at the facts, they're indisputable. CO2 is the most emitted greenhouse gas and is mainly produced by human activity. In fact, about 75% is emitted in cities, and 1/3 of all global carbon emissions are produced by the building sector. Now consider this. Global temperatures have risen 1.1 degrees Celsius and are heading towards 1.5 degrees Celsius. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, if temperatures rise 1.7 to 1.8 degrees Celsius above the year 1850s levels, the IPCC estimates that half the world's population would be exposed to life-threatening heat and humidity. So really, the time for soft action and green ratings for projects alone is kind of over for India's real estate sector. The bar needs to be set much higher. But how do we get to that? Joining me for some critical answers, Arvind Subramanian, MD and CEO of Mahindra Lifespaces, Mili Majumdar, Managing Director, GBCI India, and Sriram Kuchimanchi, Founder and CEO, Smarter Dharma. To all of you, a very warm welcome. And the first question is for Arvind. Arvind, I know that your company is targeting carbon neutrality by 2040. You've already announced a residential project which is net zero, at least on the energy front. But as an industry as a whole, is it close to doing enough?
Not nearly enough, to be candid. As you rightly pointed out, 1/3 of carbon emissions are contributed by real estate. The advantage we have in India and the golden opportunity is a lot of that real estate is still to be built. So if we were to look at what India's real estate stock will be in 2050, almost 60 to 70% of that yet has to be built. So it gives us really a golden window if we seize this opportunity to build right, because each of these buildings is going to then survive for 40, 50 years subsequently. So we really have to seize the moment.
Seize the moment. Let me come to Mili. Mili, everyone celebrates the rating. They say, okay, we've got a gold rating, we've got a platinum rating, and IGBC just had a Green Congress and they said, we've achieved 9.75 billion square feet of green footprint. Leads also ranks India third outside of United States, China and Canada. But again, I mean, if I look at the rating parameters, even at the level of gold, a lot of them are common with just what the state-led building council rules actually set up. So what is the glory in just having that rating, especially at a time when we are hurtling towards a climate change disaster?
Yeah, you are very right, Manisha. In the sense, the numbers that all the rating agencies, the green building certification programs put together, we claim to have achieved, that are certainly far and few in terms of the dimensions of the real estate sector in India. But certainly, I think when we talk about celebration, these celebrations bring the leaders to the forefront, and then it's up to the laggards to catch up to that. And I feel, the green building movement in India has certainly brought to the forefront the need for saving emissions from the potential that the building sector holds in terms of reducing the emissions, as well as looking at holistically the other green parameters in terms of water, waste management, indoor air quality, so on and so forth. So, and you would see that more and more the green building segment, particularly to the certification, since these numbers are at the forefront to the rating agencies, that has sensitized the government to bring in the policies and strengthen the policies. I mean, today only in the newspaper, you would see that the government of India is launching green bonds. And low energy building certainly is one of the beneficiaries, which was not there earlier. It is in this year, this time. If you see COP27, what we are asking in terms of climate financing for, we are talking about nature-based solutions, and many of them have given proven results through the green buildings, and those numbers are there. So I think, holistically, the segment in totality is contributing in moving towards our targets, not only in terms of emissions, but also the other green parameters that we put together, and it sensitizes and generates awareness amongst people.
So you're saying at least the ratings get both the government to focus on more green principles and also gives leaders some recognition and the followers to catch up sooner. Arvind, I'm going to come back and toss back at you, and this is again a question before I go to Sriram, because he's got the solutions actually to help this happen. Even if you look at the green rating footprint, only 25% of it is residential, and 75% of green rated buildings are actually commercial. And if you look at India's sector as a whole, real estate sector as a whole, 75% is residential and 25% is commercial. So I understand in commercial there really no forward way left but to build probably gold and platinum and even higher buildings. But how do you get the needle to move in residential? Give us some examples of how you're planning to move that needle at Mahindra Lifespaces so that others can also follow that route.
You're right, Manisha. There's a wide chasm in adoption of green buildings in the commercial, or let me call it for lease real estate asset classes versus the for sale real estate asset classes, which is largely residential. And the reason for this is who stands to benefit and over what time frame. So in a commercial office, or today even in industrial facilities, the occupier occupies that facility for 20 years, 30 years, and therefore any savings that accrue from being green, whether it is lower electricity consumption, whether it is lower air conditioning, lower water consumption, etc., accrues to that occupier of that property. Whereas in a residential development, because it is sold to a large part, it's a for sale business to the buyer, the developer is asking himself the question saying, I'm going to spend this little bit more on making it a green building, but I don't get any benefit from it. The owner who lives in the apartment gets the benefit. So is this really making sense from a return on investment perspective? What we've tried to do, and successfully so, it's worked pretty well, is kind of change this question and not make it about the building is green and XYZ kind of benefits, but make it very tangible for the consumer. So in one of our projects, which we launched a couple of years back, we said your maintenance cost is going to be half that of the peer group. And we translated that into actual rupees savings per year. If you look at 50,000 rupees per year over a lifetime, that is roughly at today's interest rates of about, let's say, 6%. That's something like 3 or 4 lakhs of capital cost saving, which is quite material. Now, customers would negotiate for hours to get 50,000 or 1 lakh saving in capital cost, but they would ignore this line at the bottom of their price sheet saying your maintenance cost is so much. So we brought that footnote into a headline, and it resonated very well with customers. You mentioned our net zero energy project, which we launched in Bangalore. Fantastic reception. Within a quarter, 90% of that first phase was sold. We opened the second phase just this past weekend, 50% sold just in 2 days. I believe a lot of that is because customers are now voting with their feet to make more sustainable choices. Now, how do we translate that into a business benefit is the next step that we all need to take.
If the customers are demanding and willing to pay, and you can show them actually over the lifetime of their living in that project a positive gain, Sriram, then it should be very easy. I mean, every developer should be enrolling on Smarter Dharma, because that's what you make possible, right? To measure the goals, the value, and set goals and values as well.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Manisha. So, in fact, Arvind put it very well. So what we are doing there is we are saying that can we help starting with the builder and set goals. A builder today will have a goal saying, I want to be 30%, I want a profit margin. I want to build 10 million square feet over the next 3 years. But when it comes to sustainability, there are no goals. The closest is certification. So we're saying from a builder point of view, can we start helping them set tangible? No, and I know this might open up a lot. Net zero is a utopian thought in terms of building real net zero. You need to look at tangible, realistic goals with a long-term impact tracked and stuff, right? So you have these tangible, realistic goals and drive your design towards it. But like Arvind said, and this I'm glad, and I know we've known Arvind and we've done a little work together, is tangibilizing that impact and talk to the customer, because the challenge in residential sector is on whom do you pin the cost for sustainability. And realistically, it should be borne both by the builder and the buyer. And to make that possible,
but Sriram, I mean, most people, proponents of sustainability say it's actually not that much more expensive to build absolutely sustainable project. It's really the thought behind it. So is there really an extra cost to the developer? I mean, you've got the model in front of you.
No, great question. So the truth is, cost increment is extremely small. It depends on when you start looking at sustainability. Most of the time, builders look at sustainability post or at liaison time, right? After design is frozen or some basic infrastructure development has started, when it gets costly. But at concept stage, if these goals are baked into the project, we have seen that in water designing, actually, we saw in a project, we saw about 9 rupees per square feet drop in the cost of construction. And that's very possible. We publish a white paper with CredI people where we could show that if at the outset you can, and then you bring other players, other stakeholders, including government policy to get approval, you can actually see costs drop if we start at the beginning and sustainable design becomes core, not a certification driven or not an afterthought. And that is what, we and our platform is able to do, is
I think
help inject the sustainability at the
I think you've said that, sustainable, you have to start the project with keeping sustainability as the core goal. And then you would probably achieve everything, a lot of savings, and you can reach a net zero project. Let me come back after the break and of course toss across again to Mili to get those answers. As Arvind pointed out, that a lot of India is still to be built. So the opportunity is huge to do it right. When we come back, we focus on what's called the embodied carbon footprint, the steel, the cement and all other ingredients which go into building. How do we get to a place where every brick is the greenest that it can be? Possible to achieve a net zero economy without real estate sector in India becoming a net zero carbon emitter. That's a fact. So even as India moves to achieve its carbon neutrality target by 2070, we look at the massive overhaul that the real estate sector needs to undergo to reach that goal. So Mili, I'm going to come back to you. In most of the green buildings conversation, and we've discussed this again and again, everybody is focusing on the operational green savings on energy, water, waste, not really at the embodied carbon footprint. I mean, even how long will it take for India to move in that direction? Is their lead being taken by at least the top developers of the country on that front?
So on the green building front, what we are trying to do is that we are including the life cycle conversation into the newer program that we are developing. And as you rightly said, embodied carbon is one critical component. If you really look at maybe the whole emissions from the building sector in 2019 at 12 gigaton of carbon equivalent, 18% of that was contributed to by the steel and the cement sector. So on the industries, on the construction side, yes, you have to look at better structures, leaner construction, lesser wastage, more modularity to bring down the emissions. And also what we are trying to do is to talk to these, mega industries, the steel manufacturers, the cement manufacturers, to develop disclosures around the emissions, and so there are concepts around environmental product declarations, that kind of quantify the emissions, and through the green rating programs, one is trying to embed that within the framework.
Okay.
So I think work is going on, but still the mega, and you must understand that in India, there are a lot of medium and small scale industries, who may not be equipped to have those numbers in place. So we have to get there, and the work has already started, and the green rating programs are embedding the concepts, but still it will take some more time.
Arvind, let me ask you, do you have choices? Are there enough disclosures, at least by the large cement and steel players, where you can actually opt for, a product which has lesser carbon emissions or lower carbon footprint? Are you making those choices just yet?
Yeah, so firstly, Manisha, I wish you hadn't torn the veil off so brutally on the best kept secret that it actually doesn't cost much more to build a green building. Because, as Sriram correctly pointed out, if you start from the design stage, look at climate responsive design and sustainable materials, the net impact is only a few percentage points, maybe 5 or 7 percentage points increase in construction cost. To your question, green steel, green cement in India, I think is still a few years away. But there are many other materials that are extremely exciting. There are walling materials, there are flooring materials that are low embodied carbon materials. So that's one area which we are exploring quite actively. The second is about where do you source your material from. So if you can source material within, let's say, 200 kilometers from your construction site, that itself brings down the embodied carbon because you have less logistics cost, less diesel burning to bring your materials in and out, etc.
Okay.
And finally, to look at embodied carbon, the last leg of the cycle, which is construction debris. When a building is demolished or when it's refurbished, what do you do with the construction debris? How do you recycle it? I think there's some very exciting work happening by some startups in that space as well.
All right. So good to know that there's a lot of at least thought behind also trying to track embodied carbon footprint of a building and bring it down at least where the right materials are available. Sriram, I know that Smarter Dharma does have listings of products as well, and which actually are better on embodied carbon footprint. So does that mean that there's only a certain amount of products which can be chosen? Steel, cement are still out of that basket that Smarter Dharma has?
So there are, like Arvind said, there's tons of material. So there are two steps here, Manisha. First is we don't even know what is a typical per square foot embodied carbon of a building. There's no benchmarking really on that. Very sporadic data we have across. So I would encourage every builder to say, let me benchmark what is there, right? And then our database, our platform is there. We have taken years to collate data for different kinds of material, from window frames to tiles to roofing options to bricks to cement to everything, right? We have tons of material embodied carbon. We will help, and our platform will now calculate and give them saying, hey, this is the embodied carbon. The goal should be that I should benchmark. If a company says by 2030 I'm going to be net zero in my buildings, I need to benchmark today, and project by project I need to be injecting new material to see if that's possible. I think embodied carbon should be a bigger focus because all of us know that our grid is anyway globally going to become more efficient, right? More onto renewables. So we'll anyway have the operational coming down significantly. It's the embodied, and there are tons of options there. Cement, steel are a little behind, but there is enough research going on, and there are other construction styles where you look at reducing the amount of cement in the non-load bearing walls, and all those ideas are there. I think what's challenging, and I might be ruffling a little few feathers, but I think what's challenging is more often builders are a lot more skeptical. There is this trust issue, and nobody wants to take the leap of faith to say, let's do it. Mahindras are a few in the country who are saying, okay, I'm going to try a few new ideas. Many of these ideas are already quite mature. We always find it funny when a new builder says, I'm not sure what it is. And we actually have to take somebody to showcase a solution which is working. So that leap of faith has to happen. I don't know why builders are, and it shows the industry is actually quite behind in technology adoption too. PropTech is now ramping up in the last couple of years. So there are
leap of faith is, you're saying that there are a lot of solutions available, there are a lot of materials, but it's really the builders who have to come forward, and probably the Mahindras of the world are the outliers. Mili, would you agree with that? That, you know, even with what we have today, there is a long road or a long gap that the sector can close right away if there is intention.
Absolutely. I think so. You know, it's like if collectively the sector comes together and, you know, adopt these solutions and, you know, kind of learn from each other, then we can bridge a lot of the gap. And there is already a lot that is happening and has been done. It's just a matter of putting it to practice and gaining, you know, confidence about it, as rightly said by the other speakers.
So I'm going to go back to now the COP27, which is underway right now. And I think the biggest debate, Arvind, there is where developing countries are saying, good Lord, the problem has been contributed by all the developed world. And today we are being hurtled or being asked to, you know, rush to our net zero goal. So where is the finance going to come from? Do you believe that a lot of this can happen if the developed world actually sets aside or at least meets the commitment of the finance that they have multiple times iterated but not really done? Arvind?
Certainly, Manisha, I think there is multiple actors who need to come to the party, and it's not your problem or my problem, it is our problem to solve. So firstly, the lens that, look, we've not contributed to the problem, therefore we won't contribute to the solution itself is a limiting view of the path forward. But as you rightly said, sources of finance, which largely are the Western and Northern world, have to meet where the impact is the highest, which is the South and the East. So that has to happen, and frameworks and regulation and business models have to get created to get that match made nicely.
All right. I think we've discussed some very interesting points that, okay, as a sector, we are not that lagging, but there's a long, long way to go. Arvind, Mili and Sriram, thank you very much for joining me on this show today. It's a very relevant topic, and I do hope that the message gets stronger and the participants get much more committed. 10 billion square feet of green buildings does not even add up to 5% of India's total built environment. So what the sector really needs is to raise the bar several notches to be in sync with India's commitments to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2070. Thanks so much for watching this show.